From fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada, this is Pod Therapy. Real people, real problems, real therapists. If you have any questions you'd like to ask or advice you'd like to give, come on over to podtherapy.net and join our conversations. Today we are recording on July 4th. Jim is wearing his Captain America t-shirt.
Freedom!
Captain's a bit of a stretch here, tenderfoot at best.
Lieutenant.
And now, broadcasting from Mandalay Bay, that guy is Dr. Jim Jobin. I'm Nick Tangeman. It's time for some Pod Therapy.
Yes, so we are on the poolside of Mandalay Bay in fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada, celebrating our 4th of July, and I'm pretty proud of us, Nick. We're not tech guys, but we ditched Scott in the studio, and we are doing this out in the sun, and yeah, so what are you drinking there, Mr. Tangeman?
Pina colada.
Ooh!
It's not a vacation until I've had my first pina colada.
That's really cool. Did you have to kiss the male bartender on the mouth to get that? Or does he just hand it to you?
Did I have to?
Oh, okay.
No.
Yeah. I wasn't required to. I mean, I also tipped him. Just the tip. So that's cool. So you got your pina colada. I am more of a Corona and lime kind of guy. Nothing says America like Echo in Mexico. So, yeah, Corona and lime, but we are in fabulous Las Vegas. It is a very tender 105 already.
Nice and cool.
Yeah, nice and cool. So it's beautiful out here, and the sun is shining, and we are lounging on our little chairs, and people are staring at us wondering what the hell we are doing.
It's fine.
But it's beautiful out here. So happy 4th of July, everybody, even though you are listening to this definitely not on the 4th of July. Right. I hope you had a good 4th of July.
And to our listeners overseas and in other countries,
yeah,
nothing special.
Happy America Day.
Yeah.
Yeah, happy Everything Matters Here Day. So, yeah. We gave you jazz. We gave you KFC.
End of list.
We gave you Panda Express. Ironically. It's really big out in China. But yeah, so lots of cool things going on, and we're starting off today by not talking about America, right, Nick? The research today did not come out of America.
Correct. This comes from the United Kingdom, our neighbor across the sea, across the pond.
I've heard of those people, fog breathers.
Right, so the United Kingdom announced a national ban...
American Bandstand?
Yeah, right. A national ban on so-called gay conversion therapy. This made the news recently.
Yeah.
Nevada actually banned this practice back in 2017.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember actually testifying to the Nevada Assembly about that, so it was a really big deal.
Excellent. So we should explain to our listeners what exactly it is that we're talking about.
Yeah, so gay conversion therapy. Okay, so everybody assumes that psychology can pretty much do whatever it wants, and that we all have magic powers, and this is true. Yeah, that's true. I mean, the magician's
code. I don't think anybody assumes that.
Nobody assumes that, yeah. So, so gay conversion therapy is this technique or series of techniques. It doesn't really matter how you do it, but the goal would be to assist somebody in changing their sexual identity. And so the theory is, hey, if John Doe turns out that he is gay, and that doesn't work for him, or that doesn't work for his family, or that doesn't work for his religion or his culture, there is a form of therapy which attempts to convert John from gay to straight. And so it has existed in history for a really long time. Even Freud was using this back in the day. It became really problematic in the last couple of years, really last decade. There was stories about people that were forced into it, which is inherently always going to be unethical, right? And it always made it a little bit complicated for me because it was like, oh, you know what the scariest part of that story is the gay conversion therapy. And I was like, the scariest part of that story was somebody being forced into therapy, like to change their life. Like, that's not okay. And like to have a quality in themselves being changed. But anyway, in recent years, there's been people that have committed suicide because of it, because they went through this experience. It was very damaging to them. It really wounded their identity, and then the external pressures and things like that. So there's been a lot of suicide that's been related to it. And in the United States, a lot of individual states have passed laws saying, okay, we're banning gay conversion therapy, and they sort of define that as any attempt to try to change a sexual or gender identity of a person. And it sounds like the United United Kingdom has just done that as well. United Kingdom is interesting, Nick, because that would be an entire national ban on this practice, whereas in the United States, it's only happened state by state.
So there are still states here
in the United States
where it's still allowed.
Yes, yeah. In fact, most of the states it's still allowed, and then 1 and 2s. There's probably about half a dozen at this point that have banned it.
Okay, so I assume. I think this is a good thing,
right?
I assume you're on that page too.
Yeah, you would assume wrong. So, like I said in the beginning, I testified to the Nevada legislature whenever they were debating this ban. I testified against it. I said, "Don't ban it."
You son of a bitch.
I know. It's the weirdest damn thing. All right, so a couple of points here.
Yeah, let's hear this.
So first off, I'm a Christian, and I'm in private practice, and I pretty much wear that on my sleeve. So what was happening was I was getting people for years who would come to me. I think the year that this happened, I had a client who brought their child to me. He was a teenage boy, and he was gay. And they wanted me to do gay conversion therapy and help him understand that this is not who he really is. I made them sign a thing saying, I understand Jim's not going to do that, right? Like, I told them, hey, no, I will not do that. I will not, do gay conversion therapy. I'm not going to try to change this kid's identity, right? But I'm happy to meet with your child and find out what's going on, right? Because he's a teenager. They're malleable. I'm going to treat this through the lens of any sexual experience that's happening in teenage years. Because the kid was doing, like, sexually self-destructive things. Let's look at that, right? Let's just look at a kid not having very, healthy sexual boundaries and things like that. Okay. So I was already banning it in a sense of I would not do it. So the reason why I testified against a ban, and hear me out, it had nothing to do with believing that it's okay to do this to people, okay? It has to do with this, Nick. The government is the least qualified actor to step in and start deciding exactly which techniques we're going to do and for exactly what reasons. We already have governing bodies to make those decisions, and those governing bodies determine whether or not we keep our licenses. We have panels of colleagues who evaluate decisions we make based on the harm that it causes and based on its consistency with our ethical codes. We already have ethical codes that prohibit doing anything like that. If you're doing gay conversion therapy, and I've had this happen too, Nick. I've had a person come in and say, I have feelings that I don't want to have. I am an adult, and I am asking for your help to evaluate these feelings that I don't want to have and help me come to different places. Now, if they were telling me I have sexual feelings toward children and I don't want to have these, I have a responsibility to assist him in the work he decides he wants. He gets to set the goals of the treatment plan, right? And if he comes in and says, I have feelings toward men and I don't want to feel them, obviously I believe that, that's a little bit more ingrained than he realizes, right? And I'm going to try to help him self-discover that, be at peace with yourself. But at the end of the day, we're going to work toward the goals he wants. If Johnny Government comes in, Johnny Law comes in, Uncle Sam comes in and tells me, no, Jim, that violates a boundary that we've established as citizens voting because it's unpopular right now because we've heard scary things in the news, that's problematic to me. And so the testimony I gave to the Nevada government was, guys, do you do this in any other field of medicine? Do you personally start codifying in black letter law which specific procedures we're not going to do and which ones we are going to do? Because that's never been the purpose of law. That has never been the status of what the Assembly does and the Senate does and the governor does. They have appointed boards to oversee medical disciplines, and those boards have the authority to put you in jail, take away your license, litigate against you, fee you, anything if there's a report. And they can put out a statement, like the social work board could put out a statement tomorrow saying, hey, we do not see this as an ethical practice. If you're doing it in these ways, do not do it. And there you go. It's now banned in your state, and you didn't need to codify it in law. But I don't like the precedent of each medical discipline basing what they're going to do and not going to do, not based on collegial stuff and scientific research and rigor, but on popular opinion making its way through the government. I just don't think that's a good way to govern medical practice.
So you want it legislated by the specific boards, LMFT board, CPC board, or social work board, not through the government.
Yeah. So in the year before this happened in Nevada, there was a transgender teenage person. Her name was Leila Alcorn. She went to a Christian conversion therapist. Parents forced her to. She ultimately committed suicide, and she blogged about it first on Tumblr. So this made national news. I was brought into NPR to talk about this as a Christian therapist. Remember that?
Yeah.
And my point on that show was, A, this is not what Christian therapists believe. Like, we're not trying to change you. We don't necessarily care. And I also made this point that I believe Jesus is the person standing in between the stone throwers and the persecuted, not throwing a rock, right? But then I also said, they were like, well, do you think that this should be banned in law? And I was like, well, no, but that's not because I'm in defense of the practice. It's because I don't like that as an instrument for how you decide what medical practices happen. The person who did this kind of harmful therapy has a board they should be answering to. But we're all trying to play too close to the tennis net and not letting the board do its job. We're trying to intercept the problem with law. And it's like, you don't need to do that. That board's going to rip that person to shreds. They're going to lose their license. Their parents could criminally prosecute that therapist. There's already a whole pack of consequences that should and will happen to a therapist who malpractices like that. We don't need to go further and create like all these new boundaries that cause questions in the field. I just don't think that's necessary.
Okay, so you and I are in agreement that using this form of therapy is harmful.
Yes.
Not just like, well, it's ineffective.
Right.
But actually can do harm.
Yes.
So we are on the same page there. We are on the same page saying that no one should be doing this.
Yes. Nobody should be doing... But, okay, yes, and I want to add to that, right? So, obviously, anybody who is brought in, tied to a chair, and told, we're going to change you whether you like it or not... That is so anciently unethical, right? We don't do that anymore. We don't do insane asylums. We don't do against your will. Now we have informed consent, treatment goals derived from the patient, things like that, right? So if a patient comes in, though, and says, I am struggling with my sexual identity for a lot of personal reasons, it is not okay for me to feel the feels that I have for this same gender or whatever. I want to address that here. I have an ethical burden to hear out their treatment goals and to not let my culture influence their culture. So let's say I'm personally gay, and you come to me and say, I am feeling gay thoughts and I don't want them. Help me deal with this. If I go, well, listen, being gay is awesome. I'm gay. You should be gay. You should embrace it. You're repressing your desires. For me to come out that way, that's allowing me, my personal beliefs as a therapist, to influence the patient's goals. That's my culture clashing with theirs, right? I shouldn't allow that. So the same happens in vice versa. Like if that person comes in and says, I have these goals, I need to help them get to those goals or help illuminate those goals. So but right now, if you ban it, I'm not even allowed to have that conversation. The way the law is written, I'm not even allowed to address his homosexual desires, even if he wants to address them with me. I have to be deathly careful because I could violate the law. And this is why I don't want the law to impose itself into the therapeutic room. The session is a sacred place. We need to follow that conversation wherever it naturally goes. And so if this person wants to challenge their sexual beliefs, and we're going to do that in our session, I'm comfortable with that. That's his treatment goal. And I'm not going to define what's right and wrong for him. I'm just going to hear him out. But if it's causing him a clinically significant amount of distress because he desires the same sex, and that's problematic for his life, let's discuss it. And I think that that's fair. But right now, with a ban, you can't even do that. Nick, here's the deal. I'm kind of libertarian on this. I believe that the free market will weed out bad actors and best practices will come to the front. Because in 2,000 years, 3,000 years of medicine, that's exactly what's happened. We haven't needed governments to tell us how to do psychology. We haven't needed governments to tell us how to do pediatrics. Those fields rise to the top on their own. The best practices rise to the top. Bad actors tend to get scorned and kicked out of the field. And we have self-correction mechanisms to do this. We don't need the government. I
would somewhat agree with that. The only part where I may disagree with is that I don't know as if that's going to solve the problem on its own. Because you look at every state being completely different. For example, our next door neighbor, Arizona, as we've discovered, seems like it's kind of the lawless West.
I thought we were.
Yeah, I thought we were too. And then we discovered Arizona.
We met Arizona.
And there's no laws. There is nothing you cannot do in Arizona.
Yeah.
So is it fair to the people of Arizona, because they're maybe their board is weaker than other boards across the state, is it fair to the people of Arizona that this practice that we know is ineffective and even worse is harmful can still happen because their boards aren't on top of it?